Hello, this is Bill Shed here, and today, well, I guess we could say this, or basically our third video in the Windows 11 trilogy, you could say. But also, this is going to be the first video out of like 3 videos. I want to talk about like Linux. Like this video right here, I think is the reason why I say it's the third in the Windows 11 video, and the first out of this out of the 3 Linux videos I'm going to make about how like the issue in Linux, like think something that's holding it back, and how the Linux community can grow, and how Linux could expand. So today I'm going to talk about how I feel Linux. Well, I think right now is the best time for the Linux community to act as a whole, or a general part of it, or a company like Canonical. Go if you know what I mean. So basically, let me explain. Right now, the entire like a lot of people are confused right now. A lot of people know about a CPU, and like the most you could probably expect anyone to know about a computer could probably be something like what the heck a CPU is, and and the least, and anyone that knows anything about computers, everyone that knows anything about computers knows what a CPU is. But to varying degrees, not everyone has a big thing up here when it comes to computers. Unlike me, but I still don't know the whole entire thing. So, the thing is, Microsoft is requiring something called TPM 2.0, as well as they want everyone to have an 8th generation Intel CPU, or not sure if they want a Zen 1 or Zen 2 Radeon. I mean, no, not Radeon, AMD CPU, Radeon's GPU. So, well, I feel, so basically, this, of course, has caused a lot of confusion among people. A lot of people are not going to be able to upgrade to Windows 11. And thing is, if the Linux community doesn't act, you're going to see a lot of people. And thing is, kicking out 32-bit systems, which is what Microsoft is doing, as well as kicking out a lot of computer users because they don't have an 8th gen CPU and they don't have TPM 2.0. Like, I would literally place money on the bet that most people don't even have an 8th gen CPU at least. Like, most people probably have like some below that. Like, the only people I could probably expect to have an 8th gen or higher CPU are probably the gamer oriented people. But even then, I have a 3rd generation CPU. But don't take that as a reason to throw at me like, oh, you're just salty because you're like, to say that, oh, you're salty because you can't upgrade to Windows 11. Don't worry, I wanted to upgrade my gaming build to Windows 11, like my gaming boot, the Windows boot on here, for games that can't run on Linux. And yeah, I don't want to go into specifics here, but I know some of you are going to be telling me why not create a virtual machine, and I don't have 2 GPUs, and I don't have room for 2 GPUs. And well, I guess I could like see if I can get someone out there to create some sort of script, if it's possible, for when like I basically turn my Intel integrated graphics other than the RX 590 and like have the 2 flop for a gaming virtual machine. But even that, I wouldn't go that far because you got some anti-cheats like BattleEye that are just targeting virtual machine users, and that's gonna be something I'm gonna talk about a bit, like in the next like in the next video, like after a distro review I'm probably gonna do tomorrow, and that would overall be like what's wrong, like why do some developers have something against Linux, or why Linux is seen as a second-class citizen commonly, if you know what I mean. So about, oh my. So basically, people not knowing TPM 2.0. Like I said, people are going crazy because a lot of people are just find out they're going to have to buy a new computer or upgrade it. And somebody like me can't even put an 8th gen CPU in here. I'd have to get a completely new motherboard, and most people well, who got Windows 10 on or upgrade from Windows 7 or Windows 8 on an OEM license, you can't transfer that to another motherboard. Thankfully, I'm lucky enough to have a retail Windows 10 license in my computer or my Windows boot, so I could put a new motherboard in here and move it over potentially. But a lot of people can't, so a lot of people are stuck with buying a new computer. And a lot of people, anyways, don't even have that experience to switch out a CPU or run laptops, so they're gonna have to get a new computer too, and they want to run Windows 11. Which here's the thing. I think because of this is one of the Linux community's best opportunities, or a big distro developer, or Canonical, for example, or even Red Hat, etc., to basically throw an advertising campaign or something, or get together and spread a lot of awareness about Linux. Because when you're going to bring up the idea of that that you don't need to buy a new computer, or you don't need to buy a new motherboard and Windows 11 license. You don't need to buy a new computer. You don't need to throw $300 or even $500 or $1,000 out the window. Just because Microsoft is wanting you to have an 8th generation Intel CPU or TPM 2.0, if you know what I mean. So I think if Linux me were to do this and provide people with the fact that Linux, like, unless you're talking about Red Hat, or I think the highest tier version of Zorin OS, maybe a couple other distros out there, that Linux is most of the part free and open source. Some stuff in the kernel is not free and open source, you know what I mean, but Linux is mostly free and open source. Your distros are free and open source. By free, I mean both as in doesn't cost money, as well as liberty. Screw around with as much as you want. Libertarians' wet dream, if you know what I mean. But anyone's dream too, other than Microsoft, because they're probably, if you lean a bit towards a certain political direction, if you know what I mean, they probably want to kick you off of Windows. Not to politicize Linux or anything. I'm just mentioning that as a possibility that could happen at some point. And thankfully, we're starting to see some OEMs start looking at Linux as a possibility for, like, making Linux computers, you know what I mean? But like I said, the Linux community needs to spread awareness about Linux and to the masses. Like you can argue as much as you want about how the normal user, like, they wouldn't spend their time, or Linux is too hard to install. No, Linux is not hard to install if you're talking about Ubuntu or Open, or like Ubuntu, Fedora, Zorin, or Linux Mint. Many of your mainline distros you see newer people going to. There's a reason why there's newbie distros. Distros you don't have to be a sysadmin or a genius to install. And even that, I wouldn't even consider Arch a genius distro to install. But still, command line, and it would freak some newer users out. Even though Arch installation is quite easy. And I think that's one thing that's kind of roadblocking Linux here, like from going out there. The Linux community would have a literal fight over what distro to throw out to the masses. What distro to expand. Like, to advertise. You're going to literally have people from the Arch Linux community, some of the elitists, literally say, let's throw Arch Linux out to the entire community. You're going to have some, I'm going to say, morons that are going to think that, hey, how about we give Gentoo to the mat? No, like I said about Arch, I know Arch is easy to install, but it's command line. They're literally when they're going to say, like, what the heck am I supposed to do? Like, that's what a newbie would see. I've gone through it, it's not that hard. But you shouldn't just be telling a new person to Linux to, like, oh, watch this YouTube video, read the Arch wiki. Like, dude, there's something that you need to realize. These people are just going to be turned off by that. Looking at if you could really go install Arch Linux or Gentoo, I'd heavily recommend watching a YouTube video. It's on on install other than looking at the wiki. If you're newer, like if you really want to install Arch, but even that, I would see Manjaro, or I'd see Manjaro as a far better idea if you're wanting an Arch-based distribution throughout there. That's basically why I think the Linux community should come up with like 3 distros for people to choose from, based on based on 3 characteristics like Ubuntu compatibility and stability wise, ICE Manjaro for maybe Manjaro for potentially like more developer based stuff, and who knows what the 3rd distro would be. Maybe Ubuntu would actually be the best one to throw out there. I know a lot of people will be raging at me over this, but Ubuntu is probably the best one to throw out there. Maybe Linux Mint or Zorn, one other. But I think Ubuntu would be a great one to throw out there. Once you get people, I don't think people would have a hard time using Ubuntu. They'd go on Google Chrome's website if they really want to download Chrome and see download for Linux. Click it, .deb file. Like, you just download that, click on it. Like, especially if they're code from Mac OS or something, that should be easy. Like, they should have been used to something like that. Windows users, that should be more comparable to a .msi file or even a .exe at an extent. It's not that hard for Ubuntu, even though with Arch you'd have to go to the AUR. And some newer users, like, that could be a blessing, but at the same time, they wouldn't know how to use that first. So, the Linux community needs to realize that maybe Ubuntu, first of all, is a good distro to throw out there if they want to get Linux out to the masses. And this is a great opportunity to hit Microsoft in the weak spot with Windows 11. This will probably who knows if this would convince them if us as a Linux community realize its potential and start throwing out Linux out there, telling people that there is a reasonable alternative to paying $500 for a new computer because their computer won't run Windows 11, because Microsoft had to go full on all out on requirements. So that's basically how I think I think this is the best time for the Linux community to throw Linux out there, and the best opportunity Linux has at the moment to get out there. Basically providing people with a reasonable alternative to paying a lot of money for a new computer and moving files over. Well, they're going to have to do the same thing with Linux, but Linux, like, there's more positives to it than buying a new computer, opening it up with Windows 11, and dropping a crap ton. Why not? And some of you will bring up stuff like, what about Photoshop? What about Microsoft Office? And first of all, you got alternatives. LibreOffice should not be hard at all for anyone to migrate over to if they use Microsoft Office. And again, a little bit more for some moving over from Photoshop, but even then. And if you really want to use Photoshop or something, I'd say you could just back it. I'd read appdb.wine.org. No. What is it? I've got Wine's website. So, yeah. The idea here is Linux community tries to get people over to provides people with a reasonable alternative to paying a lot of money. And basically provides a really good alternative to some that's throwing them a bunch of negatives. But back to the idea of proprietary software. Finally, remember what I was going to mention here. The thing is, with Photoshop, like what I've read on AppDB on Wine's website, oh yeah, it's winehq.org. appdb.winehq.org. The thing about Photoshop is, Star doesn't work, the application runs fine though, so if you want to really use Photoshop, then just move Photoshop to USB, we go to Linux installation, copied over there, not the installer, the entire installation directory where the application was installed to, and just run on Linux through Wine. And also, thankfully, Roblox about a couple weeks ago was finally able to run Linux again after literally 6 years, because something caused Roblox to stop working on Linux back in 2015, but now it's able to run again. So I'm going to get a Roblox video out soon on my gaming channel. Make sure to subscribe to that. This is Bill Shed here. Hope to see y'all next time. See ya. If y'all like this type of content, make sure to drop a like. If you wanted to see more of this content, make sure to subscribe. If you don't like this content, or specifically this video, drop a dislike. And it'd be heavily appreciated if you were to also drop a comment explaining why you disliked the video and some issues, also known as constructive feedback. I'll see y'all next time. See ya.